Go.
And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham-Pars incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And guess what? Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday, is tomorrow in the United States. So if you celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope you have a happy and a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's also, I can't believe this, it's the 6-year anniversary tonight of our show. I'm having a little trouble getting to the chat room, so I should be in there sooner or later if I figure this whole thing out. Our guest this evening is Jeremy Corbell. He will be discussing his great new documentary film, Patient 17. I watched it on iTunes, and I highly recommend it. It's a great movie. It's very well done. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Before our guest, we have Alejandro Rojas with UFO Updates. And before I forget, I've mentioned a number of times on the show, even as late as last week with Lee Spiegel, that a friend of mine at an auction house had an early UFO triangle sighting. So I talked to her last weekend, and I recorded it. So I'm going to be playing that clip coming up when I introduce Alejandro into the show. Little housekeeping, though. I sent out a newsletter today. There is going to be some changes coming up. As I mentioned last week, I had bitten off more than I could chew with the Monday night of the Everything Else show. If I was retired, it wouldn't matter at all, but I do have to make a living, and I have a very full plate. It's actually overflowing at this point. So it's really, really hard and very stressful for me to do the Monday show. So as it is, I plan my shows on Wednesdays and stay home. That's what I do as far as I take every Wednesday off to make sure I'm here so I can do that. So what will change? Well, first of all, we're going to be moving from the live stream YouTube to a larger live audience on KGR Radio, and that happens on December 13th. There's a chat room there for listeners as well as a phone screening system that I can use, actually. For those of you who are listening right now live on YouTube, well, I hope that you will move over to the new platform. I have tried to figure out if there's any way that I can run a YouTube live stream at the same time. I don't think I can because I'd have to stop it on every break. And as far as I know, everything I've researched, you can't restart an event that's live on YouTube. So I would either have to have 4 shows. It just wouldn't work. So what I'm going to do, I'll probably record video along with audio and actually post them, as I always have right from the beginning, on YouTube. So the full shows will be posted on YouTube. And so that's what's happening, going over to KGR Radio. That happens on December 13th. And so I suggest if you want more information, you can visit the website, podcastufo.com. I will be making a formal announcement through one of my newsletters. And you can sign up for the weekly guest notices and announcements. It's on the right-hand sidebar. You just have to pop in your email, and that's it, and confirm it, I think. When I first announced I was going to do the Everything Else show, some supporters were unhappy because my focus wasn't totally on UFOs. But I do have one more announcement, and that is I am going to mix in a different topic now and then on my regular podcast, podcast UFO shows, maybe once a month or something like that. I'm going to make sure the main focus of the show is UFOs for all those people who have been supporting me right from the beginning. I've been hearing from a lot of you lately, and thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Lastly, there will be some show breaks. And Alejandro's going to be joining me for the first 25 minutes. He's usually on for 15 minutes, so this will be great. He's going to be on a little bit longer. Then there's about every half hour or so there's breaks in the show. There will be music for you that listen to the show as a podcast. You'll just hear a little bit of music on the breaks. That's it. You won't hear any commercials or anything like that. I hope you all understand I'm trying to do this for the good of the show to gain a wider audience. And so that's it for me, and that's certainly enough. A lot to swallow. Alejandro, how are you doing? Alejandro.
I am doing well. Sorry for the pause. I had to unmute.
Oh, you had to. Oh, yes, that's right. A mutiny. All right. Hey, Alejandro.
Unmute me.
Yes.
Oh, look, and I have a guest. Like you said, it's a holiday, so family comes in.
I didn't
and
see him.
some people.
I see, like, you're going to have to move a little bit more. There he is. Who's that? Hello.
Hi.
That is my cousin Jason.
Hi, Jason. Welcome to the show. He's on the
He's
anniversary Thanksgiving show. We got it all going tonight.
Yeah, when I began my paranormal adventures, he was my buddy, my partner.
Oh, really?
And
You can say sidekick.
No, more than a sidekick.
Yeah, no.
More like a partner.
Well, sidekick is good.
You blazed the trail,
All right.
and I went.
So I've been talking about this UFO triangle sighting. So Alejandro, you don't mind if I play it in the beginning here before the news, do you?
No, this sounds interesting. I'm excited to hear it.
Yes. Okay. Well, here it goes. It's a pre-recorded clip. All right. So this is a pre-recorded segment, and I'm with my good friend Kathy. Now, I have told this story a number of times, and I wanted to get it straight from her because you never know how memory works. But so, Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And Kathy, so I was at the auction gallery and I was cataloging, I believe, and somehow you saw that I did a show on YouTube online. How did that happen?
I believe it's something that John was telling me about, and I think you sent a link to somebody about something, and I started watching it, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And I think I told you I had a very similar experience.
Yes, so that's why you're on the show. So you're not someone that normally pays attention to UFO shows or anything like that, but I remember you coming out to the gallery and said, hey, I had a UFO experience. So can you tell the listening audience exactly what happened? And first of all, start out, what year was that?
You know, something, I was trying to remember that after I had spoken to you a little bit. I think I was 18 years old, right around there. It was like 1975, 1976, right around there.
Okay.
And we live in Ipswich. I was living there at the time, and we were going shopping to Beverly.
This is in Massachusetts, by the way, for the listener.
Massachusetts.
Yep.
And there's a little shortcut that you can take. It's called Mill Road.
Mm-hmm.
So we would cut through there to get, you didn't have to take like 1A or a highway. It was like a little back road. So it was my mom and my Aunt Winnie. My mom just passed. She was 86, and my Aunt Winnie is still alive. She's 90. And I was with my cousin Judy, and we were driving down the road, and it was very much farmland. There were very few houses, and we got to this one spot, and it was a very, very open field. And all of a sudden, when we were driving, we were kind of noticing these 3 lights, and they were different colors, like red. I don't remember exactly the colors, but like I know a yellowish, a red. I don't think there was like blue, but they were very, very bright lights shaped in like a triangle.
Now, what time of day was this?
It was night. It was
nighttime.
Pitch dark.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it was pitch dark.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably, I'm going to say, probably 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock. It was like more in the winter time, so it was dark earlier.
Yeah.
So we are going down the road, and we're seeing these lights, and I kept saying to my mother, oh, my God, look, and there's an airport there, Beverly Airport. And I kept saying, Mom, oh, my God, look at that thing in the sky. And my mother's like, be quiet, it's just a plane. I said, Mom, that is not a plane. I said, and it's very, very low. So when we got to the clearing of the field, my Aunt Winnie pulled over, and we rolled down the windows, and this thing was just like hovering. It was hovering over us. and you could see like a shape, but not really a shape. It was like almost foggy. I don't know how to explain it. And I got out of the car. My mother's like, "Get in the car," and I'm like, "Oh my God!" And it was like literally no noise, no nothing, and this huge object was just hovering over us. Total silence.
Was it right?
No.
The silence part. The silence part is the part that always gets me. So was this like right exactly over your car?
Right over the car, like right over our car. And my mom was having like a nervous breakdown. And all of a sudden, it just and went.
Just shot off?
And so we would,
yeah.
It just left. It shot off. So we were like, oh my God. Like we were really like, oh my God, what was that? And my mom was convinced, oh, stop thinking it was something bad. And I'm like, Mom, there was no sound. Like that was something really weird. Mm-hmm. So we went shopping, went about our business, and we're coming home. And when we came home, we went the same way. We were going really slow to kind of look. And the next day, it was on the front page. I believe it was either the Ipswich Chronicle or the Salem News that we were not the only people that saw that. Several people saw it.
Wow.
And it was on the front page of the newspaper. Somebody had taken a picture. I don't know with what, because we didn't have cell phones or anything back then. And there was a picture of this thing exactly how we saw it in the paper.
Excellent. Now,
so that's my story.
That is wonderful. Thanks so much. And I'm wondering if a lot of times you can nail down, if you can't really remember the year, that makes it tough. Now, I don't know if you can talk to your aunt and if she may be able to remember the year that happened, but a lot of times you can go back and you can research these things. And I'm actually going to pass this information along to someone that does investigation on triangle UFOs, because 1975 is fairly early. You don't hear of a lot of them that early. So
it was like 75, 76. It's right in that time frame because I was still living at home.
Yeah.
I talked to my aunt about it, and she said that she remembered the lights. And, she goes, "Oh, yeah, I remember that." And we talked about it a little bit, but she didn't remember. Because I said, "Winnie, where were we? Like, do you remember where we were going?" I said, "I know we were going shopping to Beverly." I said, "But you remember where we were going?" And she said, "No." And she goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe you remembered that." That was our conversation.
Yeah. Well, excellent, Kathy. Thanks so much.
All right. You're welcome.
All right. And talk to you later.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Alejandro, we're back. I don't know if you're muted again, but you want to unmute. So what'd you think of that? That's an early triangle because I talked to Lee last week, and he said his 1978, I think it's when he had his, was early, very early for a triangle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is pretty early, although, David Marler, who wrote the book on triangle UFOs, literally, he has some going back, I think, into the 1800s, so...
Yeah, that's right. I know in the beginning, but they were very infrequent, after, in the 70s anyway. I mean, I think there's only a handful of them.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't until, especially Belgium, that they got really big. And, what's interesting about them, and we've talked about this before, but is that it does seem the triangular sightings are more blatant. Out of all the sightings out there, when people report, more than any other type of craft, the triangles are right over the car or, very visible. And I think that's fascinating. Now, I talked to Tom DeLonge about this, and it's funny because, speaking about Tom DeLonge last week, your listener asked me that question, but Tom DeLonge says that's the case because those are definitely all ours, because in his scenario, they've developed this technology in order to keep the bad aliens away type of thing. But I don't know, otherwise I've talked to people who have seen them who are certain that they're not all ours. And, Bob Bigelow did a report with the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, and they determined that they're not ours at all. And so it's really hard to say.
1975, I couldn't imagine that we'd have that technology in 1975 And
see, that's a great point. That's a good argument. Even in the late 80s, when they started seeing them in Belgium, the technology that they would have something like that is hard to believe.
it would seem we would know something about it after all this time. I mean, people like Stan Friedman will say, a secret can be kept, but I really don't think if we had something military going all the way back as far as that it could be kept secret that long. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, someone asked, well, why mention, Tom DeLonge if, like I said last week, I'm not as interested. I am interested, speculation, we all speculate. And he's got some interesting ideas. And that's what these all are ideas, I think, until we can prove otherwise. So even with Tom, I mean, it's an interesting idea. And it answers that question as to why they're so... I mean, Lee Spiegel's sighting was completely obvious, right above all these police officers and everything. It was so blatant. And if they are ours, maybe that would be the case. That reminds me, Jason's dad had a really cool sighting like that in Aspen. Do you want to hear about that?
Yeah, from Jason. Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to say it, Jason? What happened?
Sure.
You're gonna have to slide over a little bit.
I think I gotta...
Can you see him?
Yeah.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you do need to get near the mic for sure. Yep.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
All right. So, it was 1987, and we were living. It was actually in between Aspen and Glenwood Springs, a town called Basalt, and my dad told us about a situation that happened when we were there in the mountains, and my mom and I had fallen asleep, and he was fighting the desire to fall asleep too. And then all of a sudden he was woken up because there was all of the power went out. And he looked outside and he saw that the street lights had gone off. And keep in mind, this is a very rural area. This is not in a town. This is just kind of a little apartment building next to the highway and the river. And so one street light at the end of the driveway was out, which was uncharacteristic. He stepped outside and he felt a sense of he felt light. He felt like static in the air. The short hairs on the back of his neck stood up. And he came out to look up at the stars to see that the stars were blacked out in the shape of a giant, more like a trapezoid. So like a triangle with the pointy end at the tip cut off. And he kind of talked about it like it was a giant Star Destroyer from Star Wars almost, but that shape, very slowly gliding overhead. And as it disappeared behind the mountain, it suddenly all of the power came back on, and that was the end of it.
Wow.
He went back inside and told us all about it in the morning.
Yeah,
pretty exciting.
You do hear a lot of those cases where the power goes out, whether it's a car. You don't really hear too many stories where the power goes out, like in houses and things like that, but you definitely hear it when someone's car, ignition stops. Many, many stories. Thank you very much for that. That was great.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So Alejandro, I know we've eaten up a lot of your normal time. Do you have some UFO updates for us this week?
UFO updates. Okay, yeah.
Typewriter? Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of the typewriter noise. And for those of you who are younger, what a typewriter was like a thing you would, like a keyboard. It was the first keyboard. I was thinking about something too, and on a side note, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is that who knew that, you see the kids typing, and we're all typing all the time. When we were kids in typing class,
yeah.
Kind of thought, this is stupid. I'm not going to be like a secretary or something typing papers.
Exactly. I remember feeling that.
Who knew we would be typing like that was such a big deal now? Now it's like, it's a huge deal. We're all doing it constantly.
I can't write anymore. I tried to write a letter
Yeah.
to this elderly woman that was my father's girlfriend when he passed away. Tried to write her a letter the other day. I can't read my writing anymore. I'm so used to
Yeah.
typing everything. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Terrible.
So, UFO sightings. Yeah, this is kind of cool. It's getting a lot of attention too, is that there's this group called the Data Duo, and they essentially take data and make visualizations with it. And they do some really cool stuff. And they do these competitions where they compete. So they take a set of data and then they will visualize it, and then you can vote for who's you like, one or the other. The two people are a woman named Pooja Gandhi and a man named Adam Crahan run this site and do this challenge. This week or this month, they decided to do UFOs. So they went to this site called Kaggle that has a lot of different data sets that they've put together. And one of those data sets are UFO sightings from 1960 to 2014. I went to look at the site, and it's actually from NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center, which is ran by Peter Davenport, who you've had on the show quite a bit, and I know you know him pretty well. But these graphics were really cool. They show kind of sightings all over the world and in the United States. One of the things I did with the map is I noticed, you can't just take sightings. Where are sightings, the most sightings? And here's why. Because the most sightings are where the most people are, and I took a picture of the United States at night to kind of graphically show this so you can really see it. And sure enough, it lines up with their maps almost exactly, because there's more lights where there are more people. So what you have to do, I think, to get more accurate numbers is to figure out per population. So divide, like the number of sightings in a state by the population, and you can get how many sightings per person, and then you get, I think, a more accurate idea of where the hot spots are. So I did go to Kaggle and got that data set that they used, and I ran those numbers to check that out and see where the more sightings per person. The interesting things that pop up, Washington pops up to the top, but that's where NUFORC is headquartered, and they do get quite a bit of press out there. He's kind of in the Northwest. When they write a story about UFOs, they'll often go to Peter Davenport. He's like their local guy to talk to, which makes sense. And so they get a lot of reports there. But when you look at the other states, Oregon's really high up there. I showed some numbers that I took from 2014, and you see Oregon was pretty high up on that one as well, which is really interesting that Oregon should be so high. My numbers that I did in 2014 were MUFON numbers, but they do correlate with Peter Davenport's pretty well. Other states that are pretty high up there are Arizona, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Idaho, Nevada, Colorado, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Utah. Some of those are, so the per population, those are some of the places that you get, which I think are more realistic as hot spots. But still, these visualizations that the Data Duo did are really cool, because you can highlight the different graphics and stuff they have, and information about them will pop up. At openminds.tv, I just have the images highlighted there, but if you click on the images, it'll take you to the interactive visualizations that you can kind of play with and get all the data on. So they're really cool. And what's kind of funny is I wrote this story. Bustle wrote a story, a website called Bustle, and that's where I found out about it, and then I wrote more about it. But now these maps are popping up all over the place. So a lot of the media is picking up on these maps and posting them all over the place, which is kind of cool, because it's, it's one of the reasons why, and I mentioned her book, Cheryl Costa wrote a book about sightings and where they're reported, and her book got a lot of attention for two reasons. First of all, she did a great job getting out there and getting the word out about her book. But second of all, people want to know about UFO sightings in their area, and that's what this map and her book allows, which I think plays well with the local press too. So yeah, that was pretty interesting stuff. What do you think? I know you looked at that.
Yeah, I did check it out, and it occurred to me, I wondered how, when you mentioned that, Washington was a focus, Peter Davenport's located there, it also made me wonder about how easily accessed reporting sightings are, how much of a difference that makes. In other words, like if you did this very same thing in Europe, what would it look like? You know, what type of reporting centers do they have, and or you know, how can you report a UFO in, say, you know, France or places like that? So per country would be really interesting as well, not just the
Yeah.
United States.
You would need some different data sets. So, for example, MUFON does have a pretty strong presence throughout other countries, whereas NUFORC not so much. Canada, of course, there's Chris Rutowski, and I forget the name of his group, but they do a lot of reporting, collection, and analysis. So he's pretty popular up there and gets a lot. In France, of course, that's pretty much the only Western country where they have an official government agency under their space administration, essentially. So they get a lot of reports there. And you can go to Japan, France's UFO organization's website, and they post right on the front page their statistics, some of their top sightings and stuff like that. So yeah, that would take a bigger effort from someone, but it's something that's probably worth doing. That would be really interesting.
Wow. So, hey, I want you to have a great Thanksgiving, and I do appreciate, you know, your cousin and you stopping in for our show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us.
Our pleasure.
Joining us. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Happy Turkey Day, people.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, you take care, and I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you later.
All right. All right, everyone. So that's it for Alejandro. Now our guest, I'm going to be bringing in Jeremy Corbell. He's an artist. He's a filmmaker. Does an excellent job. Extraordinary Beliefs is his website. And we got a lot to talk about. Jeremy, I hope you unmuted your mic. How are you, Jeremy? I still can't hear you, Jeremy. Jeremy, you there? Don't tell me I lost him. All right, hang on, everyone. I don't see him. Live radio. Okay. So the new Skype, I always have my Skype sounds muted. The new Skype does not have that option. I'm not too happy about that. Jeremy, can you hear me?
I sure can. How you doing?
Good. And I want to tell the listener what dedication you have. Your internet went out, and you took your car and you drove somewhere on top of a mountain, somewhere in California. Thank you so much. That's dedication.
No problem. That's right.
Yeah.
No, I live really, remotely out there in the Mojave Desert, and the only connection I have to the outside world is this tiny little 10-inch dish, and it was acting a little bit freaky. So I kind of drove up to one of the mountains we have out here in Pioneer Town, California, and I'm broadcasting in the middle of the Mojave from a mountaintop.
Wow. And you sound crystal clear, so I am excited about that. So let's see. We had you on, I think it was, wow, it's got to be like 3 or 4 years. Tonight, I don't know if you heard us announce this, but it is the 6th anniversary of the show. I can't even believe it.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah. It was just, I don't know, I happened to look, and it was this night I talked to Stephen Bassett. He was the first guinea pig to be on my show, and I did a terrible job. It was not so good. So almost 300 shows later, here we are. And I got to tell you, I know just as much about UFOs as I did when I started. And that's nothing. Yeah.
We actually only know one thing about UFOs definitively, and that's really fascinating. That came from a conversation I was having with Jacques Vallée. He recently visited, and we were able to compare notes on elemental and isotopic analysis. And when he came out, we were talking about the one thing that is known about UFOs scientifically, and that is that UFOs represent a huge amount of energy in a small amount of space. And that has been proven to most people's satisfaction. Other than that, it's anybody's guess.
Wow. I have never heard it put that way before. Now, I know Jacques' philosophy on something along the lines that if it's just extraterrestrial, then he'd be disappointed, or something along those lines. And, I often ponder what the heck it is. I have no idea. And that's one of the reasons I love doing the show, is because there are so many people with ideas on what exactly it could be.
Yeah, I mean, he came forward with the extraterrestrial hypothesis in originally, and then he himself abandoned that philosophy as new data sets became available. He was actually kind of arguing with Steven Spielberg back in the day that this should be something that conveys more of a multidimensional, or even what John Keel termed as an ultra-dimensional phenomenon. But we as the public were not really ready for that at the time when Steven Spielberg was making his movie Close Encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So they went with a more traditional approach. But then if you look at the Indiana Jones Crystal Skull, that's when they showed the kind of idea of changing dimensions. So yeah, Jacques Vallée came forward with the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and then came forward with the other hypothesis, which right now is more accepted, or it is being embraced with the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is that we're dealing with something that might be way beyond that, way stranger.
Yeah, when I met Jacques out in Phoenix actually you were there as well, I was standing in line with him at the hotel, and I said, just a quote that I say from my show, and I had not even heard what he thought about it. Unfortunately, I hadn't read any of his books, which I do plan on doing. Shame on me. But I said to him while I was in line, I said, maybe it's something we haven't even thought of yet. And he kind of chuckled, and he says, yeah. He says, I think, that's kind of what's going on, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the most comical parts of our interaction was we're sitting at my ranch, we're watching the sunset. We've had this great, kind of comparing of notes and ideas with the scientific analysis of what people claim are non-terrestrial, parts. And as we're kind of watching the sunset, I think, this is my chance. This is my moment. And I said, what is this whole UFO thing really about? And asked him a few very specific questions. And he kind of took a long pause and then just kind of turned to me and said, I have, after all these, come to those same questions that you're asking now. And I just don't know the answer. And I just look at him and I'm like, well, that's depressing. Because I expected him to give me, something, like that he knew something. But I think that he is mystified by the whole experience as much as he knows. New questions arise, and that's just part of the game here. But at the same time, we do know more now than we did before, and that's progress. And we want to maintain progress.
I was watching a documentary on UFOs, and there was a clip that was recorded, I want to say in the 1960s, for a UFO researcher was speaking, and I can't recall his name, but I really got a kick out of what he said. He said, I really think that we're going to find out, and I'm going to find out in my lifetime, what's going on. And I think that's the misgivings that a lot of people have, is that, we're actually going to find out, and it's a total mystery. And I don't know. I think it feels like we're close or closer than when I started 6 years ago, but I don't know.
Well, what does it mean to find out? So that's something that I've grappled with myself. You look to people from the past who have walked the path that you're walking now and see where the pitfalls are and what's already been learned, so you don't repeat history. So I can confidently say that today, speaking with you through Skype in 2017, that I do know more about the UFO phenomenon, and just the phenomenon that includes UFOs. I do know more about it today than I did when I began. But most of that was about discarding my preconceived notions. So knowing more is sometimes just trimming away the fat of what you think you do know going into something.
That really does make a lot. I totally get that. And it's like you have to have a fresh slate. And it's always when you're trying to you're trying to understand something and you have something already in mind, it's already tainted right away.
Yeah, I mean, to give you a concrete example of what I just said, is that when I first started in this field, I was sure these were saucers from other star systems, that this is a physical phenomenon, that it was hard craft coming in from deep space with certain types of propulsion systems. But clearly, over time, it's something that you do learn when you really listen and you speak with people and you get behind a little bit what it is that they're originally reporting. You come to understand that this is something that is physical, but it is not completely physical, that there's a duality, kind of like the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, where there's a superposition of two things at the same time. This phenomenon seems to interact with human consciousness, just like those experiments, the double slit experiment as well in quantum mechanics.
Oh yeah,
that there's some sort of relationship that it has
to the observer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were you able to hear the clip of my friend talking about her UFO experience?
Yes.
So I got. I don't know if you noticed, but she said when she looked up, she said I can't really describe it. It looked foggy. I thought that was really interesting.
So this is something that is reported with real UFO sightings all the time. When I was recently at Skinwalker Ranch and Fort Duchesne in that whole area of the Uinta Basin, one of the cases that I'm documenting is a gentleman named Corey, who actually is tribal security. And he also described the craft he saw, which we documented and filmed. And he described it as having almost like a cloud around it, although it was only 20 feet off the ground. And then a friend of mine out here, he saw one in 1943. I mean, this was a spectacular sighting, chased by jets, hovering over a pool with a bunch of kids in it. The water seemed to get quiet. Everybody became still. He felt like he could hold his breath underwater forever, like a dilation of time. And he comes up and he says, I know it sounds impossible and I know it sounds crazy. The craft itself, it was like sweating. And he says, I don't know how to describe it. It was like sweating.
Wow.
And so there is this moisture or precipitation that seems to occur around it, which would be consistent with high energy states.
Did you say 1943?
Yeah, 1943.
Wow. So that was before what we consider modern ufology. 1947. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting. Wow. And because it was not talked about at all back in 1943, did he have a clue on what he was experiencing, or did it take a while for him to figure it out?
Well, it was more of an emotional impact, and he's a young kid. He was more enthralled by the planes that came in to chase this thing. They were propeller planes. It was like this big deal for them to see these planes that they all have little toys of coming right over Los Angeles, over this pool. And that was kind of where I could see he picked up and was excited about it. But he only kind of deeply recalled this as he got older. I'm actually reaching out to the childhood friends that he had. We're trying to see if they're still alive, to see if they had the same experience without telling them the experience he had. But what he said was that there was no thought behind it. This was otherworldly. This was clearly not ours. And I think that is the experience that people have when they encounter something like this at close proximity. It's obvious that this is something completely foreign, completely alien to what you know.
Yeah. Alien, not to say, I mean, that term, it's like my friend Paul Eno will say alien in the sense of the word.
Right, foreign. Right, yeah. It was extremely foreign to him, to the point where it wasn't human. But that that doesn't mean that we know the origin of this craft or this display that occurred. But that was the impression that he got, and that is a big point of this. That obviously these objects, mostly light, most reports are just light.
Right.
But these objects do in fact choose, in a way, who can see them the majority of the time. And that's kind of interesting. You could have two people standing right next to each other and one person seeing it, the other's not. I've had that experience where someone is seeing one. I don't see it. I bring it into my viewfinder of my camera, and the moment that my camera captures this object, then all of a sudden everybody can see it with their eyes. It's almost like we deny it until technology shows us it's there. It's really wild.
Well, I had a girl from the aerial school encounter on my show. She was absolutely fantastic. I've gotten so much feedback from that show. But
Incredible
she was saying,
case.
she was 4 to 5 feet away from this creature. And then later on in the show, we were talking about the witnesses, how many people witnessed this. And she said some people were right there and didn't even see it.
Right.
Which is really, really baffling, especially with all the excitement going on and everything.
Yeah, but it's really common as well.
I know.
Yeah. But what's interesting is when you do get the multiple witness, and then you get from, not only multiple visual witness, but a close encounter. And then if that's corroborated with high tech, for example, FLIR footage, like we have in the 2004 Nimitz case that I've actually been working on for 3 years silently and quietly. And it started breaking with DeLong's announcement and then a couple other researchers. So that's great. So now you get a case like that where we have FLIR camera footage from the gun cam of the lead fighter pilot. We actually have lots of radar data, which I think people are fighting to get declassified right now. Mm-hmm. So you've got multiple types of technology picking up these objects in really high scientific capacity, right? Top technology. You have eye visual witnesses, people that actually see it, who are trained observers, who are engaging this object with a fighter plane. And then you have, all these other types of witnesses. So it's just kind of fascinating when you can get corroboration from multiple perspectives and sources that lead to a more totality of a picture.
Yes, I do want to talk to you about the Nimitz case a little more in detail later on in the show. But I also want to talk about your movie, which is actually out now. I watched it on iTunes, and I really, really enjoyed it. I have to hand it to you. You do an excellent job with production. It was very well done.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a colossal task. I'm a one-man show, so every frame you saw in that, I filmed, edited, directed, sound engineered. So films like that, they're great because you can put them out with absolute artistic integrity and just say, here is what I experienced. And that was my goal with my film Patient 17, which, follows the work of Dr. Roger Lear until he died, turned out to be his last alleged alien implant removal surgery. But I continued it because I wanted a scientific analysis of Object 17 for Patient 17, because he wanted to know what was taken out of his body. What was this thing? So thank you for saying that, and I appreciate it. And I encourage everybody to watch, Patient 17. You can go to iTunes. It's on Amazon, Xbox, you name it. It's on it with pay-per-view. And just take a look. My goal was to lift the visual aesthetic of UFO cinematography. Just really simply make a pretty film. But in doing so, I wanted to tell a story that was very humanizing. So I think anybody can appreciate this film. My mom likes the film. She's the most critical. So,
well, I want to talk about a couple things about the film. First of all, about Dr. Roger Lear. What a gentleman! I had him on my show a few months ahead of when he passed away. I thought he was a very nice and kind gentleman, and I'm sure working with him, you can probably agree with me on that.
Oh, absolutely. He was, except for when he was pissed at me and yelling at me. He was absolutely a seeker of truth. He was a pioneer. He was kind of a renegade. To be a surgeon and to do this type of work, it really puts you in this strange category. People don't know how to deal with you professionally as a podiatrist. But, he maintained the integrity of his work as a surgeon, as well as his work with abductees or claimed abductees. And, look, there is a case for this that should be made. If we go back to John Mack, head of Harvard psychiatry, he was clear. He wrote many books on this. He actually went and interviewed all the students like the one you had on your show at the aerial school. Right. So basically, John Mack was a proponent that the abduction phenomenon was indeed physical. It was indeed real and physical to a degree, in that these people that have these experiences, and he studied hundreds, did psychological exams. This is not a psychosis. This is not a mental disorder. This is a real phenomenon. So just take it from the fact that, hundreds of thousands of human beings, if not more, claim abductive experiences by unknown, intelligent, seemingly alien in the truest sense of the word, beings. So we have to deal with that as a society. We need to take that serious, because that is true. That is real. People are claiming that. And then when we go a little bit deeper into it, like John Mack did and almost lost his position at Harvard University, are these abductions physical? Are people actually being taken from their homes, from their cars, with missing time, and relocated for a period of time? Is that physically happening? And he landed on yes.
Which is really amazing. Right off the bat in the very beginning of the show, you introduce patient 17. He seems, to me, just his character seems like kind of a rough guy. He's a big guy. He seems like someone, like the last person you would think that would ever talk about something like this.
Yeah, he was. This was the selling point for me. I told Dr. Lear that I didn't have any experience in this area of ufology, that in fact I'm really skeptical of it, and that if I found that he was twisting the data or deceiving the public in any way, that I was going to out him. And I said, are you sure you want me to come and film your surgery? And he kind of got pissed at me, and he was like, yeah, Jeremy, I'm sure. I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and there's something to it. And I was like, all right, man, well, I'll do it. And you can kind of see that in the movie. I'm a little bit, there's some dry humor in there. I found it hilarious. He was using a stud finder and actually misusing.
I was going to talk about that.
Yeah, he was misusing a stud finder on a guy's leg to search for an alleged alien implant. I was like, you can kind of hear me under my breath say, but you guys have actual optics, right? And they're like, yeah, we've got ultrasound optics. We'll find out exactly where this is. We're not going to guess. And I was like, oh, man, thank God. So there was some humor in it at first for me. I was like, come on, this is crazy. But then with patient 17, he is stoic. I kind of describe him as, one of the cowboys of past. He's soft-spoken, and there's no insanity in his family, and he's healthy as an ox, as he says in the film. So patient 17 was really the reason why I stuck with this, because there was a circus going on. The waiting room got filled with people just trying to get a glimpse at this, poor man and the surgery he's undergoing, and he wants to maintain his anonymity. That's why we call him patient 17. And that day I kind of shielded or blocked for him. And I think that kind of bonded us, because he saw that, that I cared. And then knowing him, getting to know him, the way he describes his abductive experiences, which, let's differentiate, he knows to be real. That is not under suspicion. He had abductive experiences. He believes that. He knows that. But he was not sure that this object being removed from his leg had anything to do with his abductive experiences. So he was just as curious as me, and just as skeptical as me, to find out what this was that they removed from his leg.
Right. Something I've said on this show before, if this was happening to me, like I was having an abduction experience, I don't know how I could function in everyday life. It would just be, I could only imagine it would be totally consuming.
Yeah, we partition elements of our life. So depending on how much this is really encroaching upon your typical everyday life, I'm happy to report, patient 17, He likes riding motorcycles. He has a wonderful wife, a wonderful life. He's got a great job. He likes to, as I said, like dirt bike and camp and that sort of, kind of like what I like. And he's just a normal guy of extraordinary height. He's 6'9", kind of megalith of a man.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, he's a big dude. You know, I call him my giant friend. So if I ever got to go bang on a door to find an implant again, he's with me. So, but no, he just likes to have that normal life. And then there are these moments that will come from left field, like a curveball, and make you wonder what's going on, because you're left with two options. One is that this is not happening to you, and you're crazy. And that's very scary for people. And then, the other option is this is happening to you. You're not crazy. But does that make you feel any better?
Right.
Yeah. So it's a pickle.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So I have to say that I can't watch anything to do with surgery. So a little,
I've heard that.
I want to not do any. I'm going to try not to do any spoilers, but I will tell if anyone else is planning to watch this and feels like I do, when you see it happening, just skip ahead to 16:30. That's the time you want to skip ahead to.
No, man. You got to pry your eyes open like Clockwork Orange style and force yourself to watch it, because it's real. You have to appreciate what this man decided to let happen to him, what he decided to do. I mean, that's part of it. And, there are people, I've heard a lot of that from the film. That's why in my trailer, I give it to you front and center. So if you watch the trailer for the movie Patient 17, that's as bad as it gets. I mean, you're going to see it. And, yeah, man, we live in meat suits, and sometimes they're cut open to retrieve things, apparently.
Yeah, right. So he called them, I guess I'll just call him 17 since he's, anonymous. So he called them alien gangsters. Can you talk a little bit about that and why he called them that?
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. That stems from a question I asked him. There's a scene in the movie where he's kind of working on this little motorcycle he has and sits down and gives me this interview. I went to go see him after the surgery just to see his state of mind, what he's feeling, because everybody kind of abandoned him after this. So, I went to talk with him, and I said, well, tell me more about your abductive experiences. What do you think about these beings? What do they want? And he says, I don't care what they want. I treat them just like any other intruder. It's not like they come over and with a case of beer and pizza and say, let's have a bite and drink. And you have not invited them in, he said. He says, so, and he thinks about it, and he pauses. And this is a pretty powerful moment in the movie. He kind of pauses and goes, well, they're gangsters, alien gangsters. They do what they want with you, and they discard you. And that's how he feels about it. If he gets a chance, he will take one of them out. And he's
right.
serious about that.
Yeah.
He's fought back before in his abductive experiences. He has fought back before.
And a lot of people will claim, you hear them say that they absolutely have no control, but he was saying he sort of broke free from that a little bit.
Yeah, and he was kind of surprised. You could feel and see in the movie, you can see his surprise when he talks about it. He's like, it's like he had a revelation when he was telling me. He goes, yeah, so I guess that they do give you this control, this mental control they have over you. He goes, but I was once able to break that and, to try to defend himself and, tackle one of these beings, and that was, you could see it kind of dawn on him that he could fight back. So he did have one experience that he was able to physically move and maneuver to end the abduction.
Wow. Yeah, amazing. So we have some questions that came in. I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget them. And so some of them are based on, the object themselves, the object itself. And I don't know how you feel about what you want to give away, as far as like spoiler, as far as the movie itself.
Nothing's really going to spoil the movie.
Okay.
I can talk about it all day long. There's no experience like watching it.
Right. So one of the questions here was, having your film Patient 17 mass distributed, does this give you a better opportunity to make other films? Is there a negative aspect to this with more pressure on for you to produce films for deadlines and not have a full artistic ability or control?
That is a fabulous question. Well, first of all, whoever wrote that, I'm really grateful. That brings up a very important point. So the first part of the question is, having this film mass distributed absolutely opens the doors for me to get more work out to the public. And as you might know, I'm sitting on a lot of work. 6 years with John Lear, the full Bob Lazar film, almost filmed with Bob. I announced that a little while ago. I'll talk to you about that. I mean, that's after 30 years. George Knapp, my mentor in journalism, brought him out almost 30 years ago. I think he's 28, 29. So Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Sixth Man to Walk on the Moon, I was the last guy to film him, 3 days in his home. I have an archive that's unbelievable that I want to get out to people. And having Patient 17 mass distributed has opened the doors for me to get films out to people in ways that I've never been able to do before. So that's the first part of the question. Yes. Second part of the question, does that in any way pressure me with deadlines or infringe upon creative control? Now, this is really important. The reason why Patient 17 took so long to get out to people was because I said no to everybody that wanted to buy it. Everybody. Because they wouldn't give me final cut. Imagine that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give me final cut on my own film that's already done.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to have the control to change it. So I said no to everybody. Didn't matter how much they offered me. Great thing about working with The Orchard is it's in my contract. I have complete creative control. Complete. So anything you see come from me will not be tainted by timeline, will not be tainted by pressure or creative control. It will be a one-of-the-kind Jeremy Corbell film. I take responsibility for every frame. And now I'm just able to get it out to you faster and better.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's walk through the film a little bit. So it goes, so I already talked about the surgery. So this thing has been extracted. It was actually put into a solution that actually came from, I think, from blood of the of patient 17, or
it's a serum of his blood cells.
Yeah.
So they spin it down, for preservation.
Just to keep it fresh. The first thing that pops in my head right now is, do you know where the object is now? Because I know, I know when I spoke with Roger before he passed away, he said, I asked him where he kept these things, and he said, very safe.
Yep.
And do you know where the object is?
I do. And in fact, the film has applied some pressure to that situation. So you'll see in the film that there is a real point of contention at one point,
right,
about being able to study the object number 17. And I believe that over time, and also just the pressure of the film, I can now say that I have a good relationship with the custodian of this object, and that we have now access in order to study this scientifically and with the right mechanisms, the right types of scientific analysis. So that is in motion right now. It's a matter of getting the right tests and applying the same techniques to see if we get consistent results. So yes, I know where the object is, and yes, I'm supposed to have direct access to it at any time. So now let's see what happens in 6 months, right?
All right. Wow. There was a question, I can't see it right here real quickly, but the gist of it was when that item was extracted from patient 17, was there any difference in the way he felt? Because he does mention of him riding on his motorcycle, how all of a sudden he had excruciating pain there and had to actually pull over and lay down on the side of the road. Has anything changed with him since that was extracted?
That's a very difficult question to answer, because you have to think about it from a psychological standpoint. You have these traumatic experiences, and we do compartmentalize them. Like if you have PTSD, you're walking around 99% of the time okay, and then you have a flashback, you have a bad problem, stress-induced. So it's hard to determine when you've had traumatic experiences, if the mental effects of simply change and having something out of your body, do you question if maybe it was doing something good for you? So I would say that patient 17 has gone through a range of emotions and experiences since the object was removed from his body. Now, from a toxicology standpoint, I was able to show a nanotoxicologist from UCLA the analysis of the sample, and he was like, it's really good you got this out of his body. It has arsenic, it has yttrium, it has all these toxic alloys. It's good you got it out. So any way you want to argue it, this was something that contained toxic alloys and should be removed as a foreign body from a man's, leg. Absolutely. But patient 17 has gone on a roller coaster of emotions. Ultimately, he's loving life, as I said, has a great wife, great job, great life, and we're friends. And we get any chance we get, we hang out. And yeah, he's doing great, but we still want to get answers of what precisely. We know what it was elementally and isotopically. We need to retest it multiple times to satisfy scientific rigor. But we know what it was to a degree, but we want to find out more.
Yeah. I know, I think somewhere in your film you mentioned, retesting is important, or Nanoman, I think, said something about that. And we can talk a little bit about Nanoman as well.
Yeah.
But so Dr. Roger Lear is now gone. Is there anyone that is planning, as far as you know, to take over what he was doing and work with these so-called implants?
Interestingly enough, my childhood friend, my oldest childhood friend, his name is Mike Side. His father, Arnold Side, is a surgeon, a general surgeon for many years, his whole life, retired now. And he has offered, under certain guidelines.
Whoop, are you there? I'm not hearing you.
A surgery that my dad needed to have. So this guy's a great surgeon, and he has offered, if I set everything up, to continue the surgical aspects of this research. So there's three parts. One is psychological. You need to screen people. So I'm currently looking for somebody who will do.
All right.
So claim implants and do the same type. Yeah, so psychological. Then we do the surgery, and I do have a surgeon now who I just named, who's willing to help. And then after that, I have a scientific team. I have about 5 people on the team, all experts in their fields, from everything from material science to nanotechnology to just, a spectrotechnologist or whatever, someone that uses SEMs.
Okay. Jeremy, can you hear me right now?
Side bases. Now, this is not something that I do. I'm a filmmaker, but I'm trying to assemble that team. And so far, I have only one missing part, which is the right person for the psychological aspects of everything.
Wow. Jeremy, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to. You've been cutting out a little bit. Have you moved anywhere in your car or anything?
I have not.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll just keep plugging. For anyone that is just tuning in, we're on with Jeremy Corbell, and he's sitting in his car on the top of a mountain because his internet was acting a little funky. So he's on his iPhone using Skype. I think it's actually coming in pretty good, except for as it was cutting out right there.
No problem. Yeah,
So,
again, yeah, I just live real remotely, so having just this tiny little dish service my entire universe for 20 minutes, I felt it safer to drive to the top of a mountain. So,
so we're both on top of a mountain. So
that's right.
Yeah. Let's talk about how difficult is something like an implant to have looked at seriously by, say, a lab?
It's actually, there's no problem with that at all. But let's step back. I don't know that these are implants. These are foreign objects that are found in people's bodies.
Right.
And in fact, I can only talk about object number 17 because I can't really trust. I wasn't there for all the other 16 before. I'm sure they're well documented, but I need to find out what one is before I find out the others. But as far as laboratories looking at this information, it is absolutely a blind process. They don't care what you send them. Their job is to analyze it. So there's zero resistance to sending someone an object and having it, looked at elementally and isotopically. It's easy if you pay the money.
I understand. So you don't have to get into what you think it might be. You just say you want to know what it is.
You literally give them a sample and say, I want broad spectrum elemental analysis and isotopic analysis, and you choose the elements that you're going to be looking at isotopically. The difference between elements and isotopes is simply the number of neutrons, so same number of protons. So basically, if you have zinc, right, stabilized zinc, if you cut out the side of a mountain, there's 5, although you can study 4, the big 4 of zinc. Those are different isotopes that stabilize that zinc. And so there are terrestrial norms for that zinc. So everywhere on Earth is going to have the same ratios of those isotopes. And that's how we kind of get into origin. We can tell forensically by the isotopes and by the ratios and by what they call the isoscape, which is really interesting, which is the isotopic landscape of the known Earth and beyond Earth, if we know a little bit, where something comes from, or you can learn a lot about it. So that's what you look at, is elements and isotopes.
Yes, another question that came in was the material composition of the object extracted from patient 17 was made of exotic materials but does not look like an obvious manufactured piece of technology. Has there been any study of its potential purpose rather than its material composition?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting question. You have to presuppose there that we know what would look like to serve a certain purpose. I mean, an airplane looks really strange if you're sitting in caveman times. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer that part of the question, because that pre-assumes that you know what something is supposed to look like, depending on what you're supposing it is. But let's back up. We have to find out what it is on an elemental and isotopic level before we can start to theorize or get an idea of its functionality, because there are certain isotopes and alloys and metamaterials that do different things. And this is fascinating. In the last 10 years, we have been developing at an exponential rate metamaterials, materials that don't exist in the natural world, and materials that have unique properties with physics because of their construction. A great example of that would be graphene, the strongest substance ever created by humanity. And it's basically hexagonal atomic layers, right? And that creates a strength to it, but it's also a superconductor. So I have 2 pieces, one out of a Chinese nuclear weapon. They're amazing. You can take them and just touch them into an ice cube, and they slide in like a hot knife through butter until it freezes in your fingers, because it's a superconductor. But that's because of the atomic layering. So the metamaterials themselves, that makes a difference. So we need to know the composition of these objects before we can theorize. But that's my rule. Dr. Lear had a different methodology. He was pretty sure, because of the compilation of evidence, people's stories, the material science of this, that these objects were indeed emitting frequency. And one of his tests for this was using a Gauss meter. A Gauss meter is like basically a rudimentary way of looking at electromagnetic frequency, just showing that if you pull it up to a battery, for example, it'll ping, it'll go off. So he'd run it over the guy's leg when it's in his leg, and it's pinging like it's emitting a frequency. And Dr. Lear's theory was that there's a scalar wave frequency, he said, kind of a fancy term for a complex radio wave, and we're picking up a little part of that when we bring the Gauss meter over that. Now, that's not my theory. I don't actually subscribe to that. It could be true. I have no idea. So his idea was that these were beacons, that these were emitting data from the patient to some sort of supercomputer, an alien internet. And the ultimate goal would be to tap in to this alien internet and decipher some of what is being transmitted. I mean, it sounds like sci-fi, it sounds totally crazy, and it might be, but that was what he and his colleagues were aiming for.
Wow. That is pretty wild. Now, you said he and his colleagues. So are there some people that were working with him that want to continue on?
Yeah, absolutely. There was Steve Colburn, who was a material scientist, and he claimed to have been working with Dr. Lear for quite some time. There's a little twist in the movie that I don't want to give away.
Okay.
But basically,
I know the twist.
Yeah. So everybody should watch the movie. I was shocked. I mean, you can hear my voice. I am shocked in this movie. But anyway, Steve Colburn, he was working with Dr. Lear because of his work on carbon nanotubes, and he could kind of read the analysis, knew which laboratories to send it to. He's a controversial character, and he just is. That's nothing I can say about that. But, indeed, he was helping Dr. Lear. And then there was another surgeon who would help him when he had to do surgeries that didn't relate to feet, right? Because he was a podiatrist. And, there were a number of people that kind of helped Dr. Lear and his organization, and he had trusted colleagues and people he could go to and have them do scanning electron microscopy or whatever. And so that's, he had a circle around him. But, when you die and you're the strongest link, things tend to get dispersed.
Right. Steve, very, very bright. You can tell that right off the bat.
Yeah.
I really got a kick out of his house because I'm an appraiser, in fine arts and antiques. And I'm thinking, oh my God, 1966, his whole house, everything was like from 1966. It was pretty funny. Yeah. Pretty funny for me.
That's right. I thought that was a cool scene. That I try to create a feeling with each character and a color tonality. And you'll notice with Steve, when he's in the laboratory, it's very blue. And then when he's in his home, it's very green. And he's by this fish tank where he describes the characteristics of the fish and how they treat one another. And so it's a kind of cool scene in his house.
He needs an algae eater, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
So another question was the isotope analysis of the sample removed from patient 17 points to, now I'm quoting here, points to the implant coming from outside our solar system, if not outside our galaxy. Could you explain how isotope ratios are used to determine this?
Sure. So, I'll make this kind of simple, and we can elaborate it, if you want to. This was a real learning curve for me, and I'm still learning about this. But what that comment is referring to is that one of the findings of Object 17 was that the zinc-64 was, way far outside of what would be considered the terrestrial norm of the isotope of zinc-64 here on Earth. So typically, if you have outside a single percent, then you have something that is non-terrestrial. We study on Earth extraterrestrial isotopes all the time. We have tons of scientists that do it because you get a meteorite and everybody's excited to study it. Even moon rocks that were brought back from the moon. You can look at them and see that some of the isotopes are vastly different. And that's the way that our supernova created matter in our solar system and solar systems around us, and it essentially created the matter that we have to play with here on Earth. And they're just laid out in certain ratios of isotopes, and they vary here on Earth to a degree, but they particularly vary when they come from distant places. So the isotopic analysis we had done showed a variance in the zinc-64 isotopes at 2.5%. That is far, far, far outside the terrestrial norm. Now, you have to factor in if there is an error, you have standard relative deviation of 1.25, if I recall. So you have to go above or below that 2.5. But the general mean, variance was 2.5% outside the terrestrial norm, which basically one of the scientists goes on camera and talks about how that means this is not made in our supernova. That means this was made most likely not of our galaxy. Again, if the results are correct. And that's a big point. And I called the labs and I shook them down, and because I talked with mainstream scientists who wouldn't go on camera, and a lot of them had crazier theories than extraterrestrial isotopes. You know, they were like, "You're being lied to. The lab is pulling one over on you." It's a federal offense to change results. The lab would have to be. Yeah, it's crazy. So that's what he means in the movie, or probably that's what the question from your guest was talking about, is that you can tell through, the isotopic landscape of the cosmos, of here on Earth and outside of the Earth, kind of where things come from. And this is so far outside the terrestrial norm that it's pretty astounding.
Right. Yeah, I think there was 36. Was it
36 elements?
36 elements, which is, for a little tiny object, is really bizarre, I think, as far as,
Well, it is. Yeah, that itself is quite unique. I mean, it's majority iron, so we're talking about parts per million, right? But there's having 36 different elements in a single sample. That's why I talked and worked with a lot of nanotechnologists who create and fabricate, even in particle accelerators, these unique metamaterials. And they say, maybe in the most complex alloys that we have, you will find 4 major elements combined. One of the nanophysicists that you referenced, Nanoman, his name is Chris Cooper. I just think it's cool to give him a superhero's name because he's kind of a cool guy. So I call him Nanoman. But, he said this is a witch's brew of elements, the most astounding array of elements that he has ever seen. And that holds weight coming from a guy who literally fabricates metamaterials.
I know he seemed very passionate about talking about this. What was involved in the elements?
Yeah, well, it was really exciting for him because, look, a lot of people that didn't go on camera, they were kind of squares. They were kind of like these scientists who, like, one got written up in the New York Times a little bit after I went and saw him, and he didn't want to risk that. And there's a lot of scientists that didn't want to be involved with this idea of an alien implant removal. I mean, I kind of didn't want to be involved with it, so I can understand. But Nanoman, interestingly enough, he will talk openly with me, and he's excited about the results because how I got turned on to him was from a naval intelligence contact, who basically said, you got to look at what this guy is doing with propulsion. It is astounding. And I was like, okay. So I went and met Nanoman. Turns out, and you'll learn that in my Nanoman series, which right now I have on my website a few of the shorts, he learned the possibilities of what he's doing now from encounters with unknown intelligences, so he claims, which is interesting. Proof is in the pudding. He's a great scientist. Doesn't really matter where he says he learned it from.
Isn't that is really something? I remember talking with you, I don't know, a couple years ago about him, because you were going to do a show on something I was involved in. I don't know if you remember that.
Really?
Yeah, you were talking about you, and at the time he wanted to remain anonymous.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, how about that? So
yeah, well, he came out. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And do you think when someone like him will actually, say their name, you think that in any type of way that this will affect him negatively?
Everybody's so afraid of that, and it's so funny how I am so, I have experienced such a difference to that. When I tell people I make documentary films on the subject of UFOs, both from a government perspective, a scientific perspective, to even alleged alien implant removals, people are like, wow, that's so cool. I want to see this stuff. I mean, no one really rolls their eyes at me. So when you hear Nanoman, who is a government-funded physicist for a lot of his life, I mean, you figure a lot of people have to take a chance by coming out and talking about this stuff. People don't really have this negative look at you when you do this stuff, Patient 17, he was really worried that people were going to recognize him. There's a picture of his face, basically, or, a replication of it on the poster for the film, and
Right.
man, it's everywhere. And funny enough, he has one buddy, he went motorcycle riding with, who just kind of won't talk to him anymore, and his religious friends, maybe. There's a couple people that thought it was weird, but overall, he had a couple jobs that he was doing, and that people had seen the movie and they were excited to talk with him about it. So I don't know. I'm not a scientist, and I have the luxury of being a filmmaker and doing weird stuff, but I really don't think people give you the cold shoulder on this stuff anymore.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way because, I have a professional job that I do. I'm a fine arts appraiser, and there's been a couple of times where people were looking for my appraisal website and found the UFO website. And they're like, wow, that's really cool. Instead of, of course, I probably won't ever hear from the ones that think otherwise.
Right. But in general, I think that you'll kind of have this experience too, which is that people don't look at this the same way that they did 20 years ago. And when we might have been getting interested in this, I started when I was 13. I would talk to people about this stuff, and when I got serious about it, talking about Bob Lazar and propulsion systems and, gravity wave amplifiers and this sort of element 115, oh my gosh, people would just totally dismiss you because that was the attitude back then. But times have changed. Oh boy.
Oh, yes. Now, I do want to talk about Bob Lazar. I got a bunch of notes here, so I don't want to forget certain things. I do want to talk to you about Bob. But I think I want to kind of wrap it up a little bit for this film. We'll talk about it as we're closing just to make sure, people will check it out. But I want to know what happened with Steve toward the end of the film. Are you actually talking to him again?
I am. And so, yeah, if people watch the film, you'll see a point of contention towards the end of the film. There's some issues with this investigation that arose, and that's just part of the storytelling. When I show you my film, I show you the roller coaster of ups and downs that I went on, and you will go on that too by watching the film. But yeah, I'm happy to say everything is good. We're in communication, and we're making progress.
Okay, just one more thing about Dr. Lear. Was that did he suddenly pass away and had no idea that he had heart issues?
Yeah, it was sudden. I mean, I believe I talked to him the morning of, or it was just the day before. I still don't remember. I've been trying to figure that one out. But I had talked to him, and he was fine. It was out of the blue.
Wow.
Full-on heart attack. And, he had health issues. He was older.
Yeah.
And he did have health issues. It wasn't like something nefarious. He had a heart attack. And lived a great life, and sad to see him go. It's a loss of a friend, a loss of a giant in the field of ufology, and in a unique area of the world of ufology.
Yes.
But his research will live on, and definitely through my film, I feel I got to show him most of it, and he was really happy and proud. And I'm glad I was able to document his. I'm glad I said yes.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that nice work. And I hope it does really well. All right, so I wanted to talk to you about the topics, including the Skinwalker Ranch, Bob Lazar, but before that, I wanted to wrap up a little bit more on what we talked about earlier, and that's the USS Nimitz, UFO encounter. I think it was 2004, November 14th. Is that the right year?
Yeah, 2004, November 14th was the peak of the activity. It actually started November 10th when we're talking about this particular case just off the coast of San Diego with the USS Nimitz. There's more to come on that, but this case, yes, it is the yeah.
Can we, for the listener that's unfamiliar with it, a lot of people are calling this the Tom DeLonge case, and I think that's not really...
that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So can you? You were working on this well before it was ever talked about.
Yes.
For the listener that's unfamiliar, and I also want to talk about Metabunk and Mick West, what he thinks about it, and a little But or do you want to just start out? But let's talk about that right off the bat. Because I like Mick, you like Mick. He has debunked a lot of things that actually needed debunking. But in this
Yeah,
particular case,
we can't be too hard on him. He's a small little voice in this much larger world, and I think he just made a little Facebook post based upon, my website where I posted the video that came out. He doesn't have all the information. He's a great researcher. We'll talk about him in a second. Let me just give you the rundown, the basics of the case.
Yeah.
I am the first person to talk about it publicly. I did that on Coast to Coast with George Knapp quite some time ago. I was fishing at the time for extra witnesses through Coast to Coast, which I did achieve. So here again, if anybody was working on the USS Nimitz in 2004, I would like to hear from you. And specifically, if you were on board November 10th through November 14th for the preparation mission that was going out to sea, I have many, many, many people that I'm speaking with and have been speaking with for years, from this event. I was tipped off to it early on. And I was lucky, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it because none of it was public. And then I came across a public article written in an obscure aviation blog by a guy named Paco, who's an incredible pilot in and of himself. And he was writing about his friend's experience. And rather than blasting their names out all over the airwaves, I'm just going to say it's all out there for people to see. But this was something that was documented and written down, and I was given the go-ahead to reach out to all the primaries and try to speak with them, try to make headway, which I did quietly for quite some time. And it was something that no UFO researcher was looking into. And at the time that I started, and I was real lucky to kind of make headway and earn and maintain the trust of the principals involved in this case. But look, this was an astounding UFO and USO experience. There's a lot that people don't know about this case, and I hope that's going to be coming out soon. I certainly will be doing my part in talking about it. But off the coast of San Diego, there was a fleet commander, and at the time it was Admiral Durwood C. Curtis. I am now naming names, right? He was the big dog in charge, and the captain at the time was Vice Admiral oh, you know who it was? It wasn't Ted Branch. Ted Branch came after. It was Gill or something. I'll look up his name. But basically, you've got these people that are, kind of taking control of this situation where they're deploying out on a mission, and you have these fighter pilots that are on a routine run, and they get calls, and the calls are, what ordnance do you have on board? And they're thinking, what ordnance? We're right off the coast of San Diego. So they radio back in what ordnance, and they're given a point to go to and to go investigate an unknown. So they go and they fly out, and one person in particular was able to make visual contact with this object that resembled a large, maybe 45 feet in diameter, tic-tac. Right? So it was this white porcelain object. Now, why they were told to go look at this is because these things were coming in over the course of days from the top range of the radar system that we had on board there, 80,000 feet, and dropping down from presumably way above that, dropping down to 50 feet and stopping on a dime. And they did this within a matter of seconds. And it was, in the words of one of the pilots, docking with something under the water, 747 size circle of churning water. It was black in color, and literally these tic-tacs, as they call them, would drop down and just dock. So one individual got visual confirmation, was told to lock on it, which is typical. You lock on it so that all your systems can fire if needed, but also just have your cameras focused on. And this thing was actively jamming our most high-tech weaponry and most of our electronics that we have in America here. So that was disconcerting. And there is footage. That footage was leaked actually back in 2004 2005. And that was the early days of YouTube and all this stuff, so people didn't capture it very easily. But then it was passed around on videotapes to a lot of these other pilots and people who had engaged this phenomenon during this time, and a copy of that footage has now resurfaced. Everybody was worried about classification. It's, questionable. We don't know. But I can confirm to you that the person that shot that footage confirms to me that that is his footage. So that what you're seeing, that FLIR footage that people have pushed around, it's on my site. That is actual. That is real. And yes, Mick West took a stab at it, trying to analyze it with limited information, but so did Bruce Maccabee. Mm-hmm. And Bruce Maccabee did this for the United States Navy. He came out with different thoughts on it. Mick West is usually right on. He's helped me with an investigation, actually, a long time ago. Before I knew him, before I knew of him, when I debunked my own UFO sighting. That was pretty fun, and Mick helped me do that. So it was the Red Bull skydiving team, and I found the head cam and jumped out of the plane with the fire on his ankles, coming out of the plane. It was really cool, and I never said I thought what it was. I was just asking people what it was, and Mick actually did a lot of triangulation for that. So somehow I kind of do know Mick, and he does great work. And I think what you're referencing is that he said that, to him it appears it's a classic plane at however far away. And I mean, it makes very little sense what he said. So I think that he just is playing off of a very small amount of data, where you have Bruce Maccabee's analysis frame by frame, and it's much, much more insightful. But I hope to give maybe Mick a little bit more data when it comes out, like I will everybody, a little more data, and see what people think then.
I didn't know of this other part, that there were multiple sightings, leading up to this. And I remember hearing about there was one pilot that saw some churning or some bubbles in the water, but I didn't hear about the docking.
Well, no, you wouldn't. This is not public. I'm the only person these pilots are speaking with. So, nobody would hear about this. There was an intelligence report written in 2007. Nobody's going to be seeing that either. So, most likely nobody's going to be seeing that. So, I'm telling you straight from the horse's mouth some of what occurred on that day. And that's the thing that people don't understand, is that there's very limited information out there. And I'm fighting to get more information out to people. And I will say as well, and again, this is something that will be corroborated later. This is not an isolated event, this November 10th through 14th in 2004. It is not an isolated event. So this it's a big case. It's really big. Now, the fact that Tom DeLonge and his group mentioned it on stage, I see as a great thing, because I think it was Steve Justice who mentioned it on stage, if you can correct me, but I think that was him.
No, I think it was Chris Mellon.
Oh, no, you're right. It was Chris Mellon. Yeah. So Chris Mellon, I mean, look, badass dude. And he's coming on stage. And if you watch it again, he gives you the exact Google terms to punch into your computer and to find this one obscure aviation blog, which will then lead you to this entire report. And then he challenged Congress, saying, you cannot do your job if you do not ask for the information on this case. I mean, it was a shot across the bow. Now, that doesn't mean, Tom's a friend. I talk to him once in a while. I work with some of the people that he works with. We know each other. This is not like some big mystery. The fact they used this case was because it is very promising. It doesn't mean that they have tons of information on this case. It's just that it's very promising. So I'm trying to encourage some of the witnesses that I am only the only one in contact with, to be receptive to Tom's group reaching out to them, because, for example, Lou, or one of the guys on worked at the Pentagon with what they call the Anomalous Aerial Threat Department, which now we know about that there was one. So people say nothing happened on that announcement, you open your eyes and open your ears. Are you kidding me? You now know there was a department in the Pentagon dedicated to anomalous aerial threats. We never knew that. We always suspected that, but we never knew that. And there's Lou standing there saying, not only does it exist, I ran it, and I did so for many years, and I believe that these are not of this world. I believe these are UFOs. I believe that we can learn something from these other entities' technology. I mean, that's what he's saying to you. So with him at the helm, I think Tom's group has this really powerful position to protect some of the witnesses because of their oaths and classification. I think that they can help steward this case out to the public in ways that a lone researcher like me simply can't. I mean, that's the reason I couldn't talk about it all these years, was because I was, bound by their secrecy or by their oaths. I don't have one, but they do. So maybe Tom's group will have more ability. And so I support that.
Well, I know Robert Powell has been trying to get FOIAs.
Great. Yes.
So, and I know that's frustrating. He can't get very far.
Oh, it's going to be very frustrating. One of the pilots kind of chuckled at that, because, I mean, not to say Robert shouldn't do it. Robert is doing everything he can in the position he's in to find out as much as he can and get it out. And I highly respect that. I think that is, that is the type of work that we need. Every angle, every person. But are we going to get a lot from FOIAs? I can right now tell you there was a 2007 intelligence investigation that wrapped all of this up. And so what access is he going to get through that? It doesn't matter. He should still do it because that applies pressure. So, and he actually did learn some interesting things from the FOIAs. So good on him.
Now, when these people you spoke with were talking about this experience, did you ask them something like, well, what did this change in your life? I mean, this is pretty major.
Yeah, well, actually, I had a list of questions by an admiral, one of the most highest-ranking individuals that I've ever communicated with, and a list of questions from that perspective. I had a list of questions from a couple scientists who have a long-standing, an ongoing, how would you say, knowledge of this type of experience. And I had a list of questions from them that were everything from psychological down to the very practical and physical. So yeah, I've asked, if there's a question, I've pretty much asked it. And I don't know if you ever talk with fighter pilots, but if you don't ask the right question, or you don't even ask the question, they're not going to offer you any information. That's just, and then also, fighter pilots are, sometimes their grasp is beyond their reach. They're real air cowboys. So
right.
People don't admit weakness, first of all, because that's your career, right?
Yeah.
And you're always the best at what you do. But I'm happy to report and say that nobody had any ill effects when it came to this experience, other than their curiosity was weaponized.
What your famous saying there. So when they were actually seeing this, did they do more filming that you're aware of, or take pictures?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I am aware of multiple streams of documentation on these objects. Now, what is public, kind of, is that little bit of leaked gun cam footage or head cam FLIR footage. It's very small. It's not the whole thing. It's an important part. It's when an object accelerates away. It is true and real footage of this AAV, anomalous aerial vehicle, as the intelligence community calls them, which is a term that I kept secret for many years because it helps me in FOIA and that sort of thing, because things are termed differently, so they're harder to search for. But yeah, there are multiple streams. And I've actually talked with some of the people that were inside what they call, well, I don't know if they call it the vault, but it's where all the command and communications work out of. And there was a showing, let's say a little viewing of some of the footage that came back that day.
Interesting. Now, did you say this was closed out in 2007 or something along those lines?
No, what I'm telling you is something that is not in the public realm, but it is in fact true that there was an intelligence study done in 2007 where they did an in-depth study of what happened on those days, and then that information was wrapped up and classified.
Oh.
So
if this is classified, are they able to talk to you about what they saw?
So there's a big difference of certain details that are classified, and obviously no one is telling me anything that they shouldn't be. But if you just read the original article that came out, right, that's a description of what happened on that day. So everything's really there for you to look at. There are even some inaccuracies in that a little bit. I mean, nothing is perfect when you write it down. But that information is already out there. So nobody is breaking code, by talking to me. And that's very important that I make sure that is clear. But people are and have come forward to tell me what happened to them on that day, from radar techs all the way down to people that simply were private friends with some of the people in command at that time. So I'm getting it from many angles.
Wow. All right. Wow. This is really something. So I didn't want to miss, we only have about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes left. Also, I do want to say, if anyone does want to call in, you're welcome to call in and ask Jeremy a question. But that number is 603-967-4030. I also put it in chat. Because we can, if someone wants to call in and talk more about that, I think that's a fantastic case. And let me just ask you this one more thing about it before we move on. Is this something you're thinking about doing another documentary on?
I don't think so, because when you get into these government cases, they're very important, but there are so many restrictions on it. I wouldn't want to jeopardize anybody's, personal careers, or maybe they're out of the military and they still need their clearances, or maybe they're out of the military and they just don't want this disrupting their life. So no, I don't think putting people on a camera for this is the best idea, although you never know, it might happen. What I want for this case is I want to be able to tell everything that I know when I'm told it's okay to do so by the people that it would affect. So if I can do that, I've been accumulating the information and the data on this for quite some time, great. If I can't do it, then I'm going to encourage all of these witnesses, this whole network of people that I've built over the years, and I'm going to encourage them to talk with somebody who can give them shielding or help them to get these things declassified, which would be Lou and Tom's group. I'm very optimistic they'll have more effect than I will.
Just one more question about this. In the area off San Diego where this was happening, where they actually saw some type of docking going on underwater, has that area been explored, through sonar or anything that you're aware of?
Well, yeah, I just want to be clear. So what they didn't witness. Let's keep to the story that is public, in the sense that they saw these what I'm calling AAVs, anomalous aerial vehicles, look like Tic Tacs, dropping in from 80,000 feet to 50 feet above the water, and then hovering over a churning circle, which I personally, got the firsthand report of, what was under the water visually, but they weren't docking with it under the water. It was hovering 50 feet like that above the water. But yes, on the day of those events, they did try with the submarines to ping for objects in that area and turned up with nothing.
Wow. Well, that's all just really fascinating. So, okay, let's go on to Bob Lazar. A lot of people, I'm sort of on the fence with Bob Lazar. A lot, and I know you've interviewed him, you've looked in his eyes, and you've talked to him. I highly respect George Knapp. I think he's actually one of the best people that will talk about this subject out there. And George is, behind him 100%. Where do you stand?
Well, first of all, you should question Bob Lazar. Bob tells you to do that. So in my short film that I actually made free, the 20-minute short on Bob Lazar is now free on my website. And I did that because I want people to get prepared for what we're about to unleash. So yes, George brought Bob forward in 1989, and Bob did so to save his own hide, right? Now, if you believe him or not, Bob is telling you if you don't believe him, he understands, because he is not providing you with ample proof. He has tried, but can't. So scientifically, you shouldn't believe him until he can provide you with that proof. And in fact, if you don't believe him, spread the word and pass it on, because this has only caused hell in his life personally. I mean, he was raided by the FBI back in New Mexico, and there were further events after that. I mean, he's had issues. So the UFO field has done nothing good for Bob Lazar. So I don't think he minds at all that you're on the fence. He might say you should get over to the other side of the fence and pass the word on. But after all these years, after George kind of twisting his arm and getting 5 minutes of footage here, 30 minutes of footage there, I mean, what is the total amount of footage? And remember, this is just footage. This isn't sitting down, having dinner with somebody, seeing how they interact with their wife and their mom and their animals and their friends, and looking into someone's personal life. This is just someone on a screen on YouTube, right? What does the public have to judge Bob's case from? They have about 3 hours of footage in total. That would be just about it. Well, I can very happily tell you that after 3 hours, we broke the record. And I spent 7 days and 7 nights with Bob. And then after that, I've done a whole bunch of continuous filming, going deep into every aspect of his life, authorized. He's allowing me to do this. I mean, it's no secret, we are friendly, Bob and I. We have a friendship. So over all those years, I was able to talk with him, and he says, okay, I trust you. I like your films. I think that, the only one restriction he put on me, the one restriction Bob Lazar put on he doesn't want anything for it. The one restriction, he says, just don't lie. Just don't twist the truth. As long as you just tell the truth, that's all I want. And that's coming from Bob Lazar directly. So Bob really doesn't have anything to hide. It's more that he hasn't made himself available in order for people to know who he is. And it's easy to dismiss somebody if you don't know the content of their character and who they are. So I can't blame anybody. You should doubt the Bob Lazar story. But hopefully my film will take a perspective that allows you to decide for yourself. Because in my films, I never tell you what to think. I just show you what's in front of my camera.
It's funny. I had knew this guy in the antique business years ago, and we were chatting one day. This was a few years ago, and I said something about, I got up the courage to tell him that I was doing a show on UFOs, and he goes, "Well, what about Bob Lazar?" And I was like shocked. I said, I had no idea he knew anything about anything, and he said, I think Bob Lazar is 100% authentic, and that the government just wiped everything out. So he's been following not really the UFO field, but the whole Bob Lazar story, which I think is fascinating.
2 points on what you just said are I think are really important to mention. So one is, I have found through my work in making this documentary on Bob that the closer people are to him personally, the more they believe and know his story to be true. So the people that know him best are telling me, you got to understand Bob. And if he tells the truth about everything, then is he telling you the truth about UFOs? You have to know who Bob is to judge his UFO story. I just found that so interesting. It's the people that have never met him, that have just seen the footage online that thankfully George Knapp was able to put out. They're the harshest critics, but they have done the littlest and the smallest research on who Bob is as a person. And then you have the people closest to him. And to them, they're just, he's just Bob, but they know Bob. And they know when he's telling the truth. And he's telling you the truth. But I think that's something that you're going to have to come to on your own, obviously. And then the second thing about what you said, it's so interesting. Bob Lazar is huge. His name is huge. Everybody knows. If you scream in Japan in a room of 100 people, Bob Lazar, who knows him? You will get hands raised. You do that anywhere in the world. I mean, it's like Elvis. It's like somebody finds Elvis alive and is able to capture him on camera right now. I mean, it's wild, man. He changed the landscape of UFOs and our understanding, he's been telling you the same story for almost 30 years. Just because he can't prove the entirety of his story doesn't mean it's not true. And in fact, most of what Bob has said, a lot of it actually, we've been able to verify. S4, that is a real site off of Area 51 at Papoose Lake. I have personally confirmed that. This will be off the record, like nothing I can ever tell you how. But, George Knapp confirmed it publicly through a public affairs officer in 1989. How did Bob know? How did Bob know that there was going to be a secret test flight of a flying saucer over Papoose Lake in 1989, the exact time, on 3 different occasions, bringing friends, and they filmed it? People cannot get around that. How did we know about the OSI and the OSI doing the security clearances for the Area 51 and subbase, Area S4 as well? All of this, Element 115 was always theorized, right? When they were fabricating Element 115, when that was actually being done for a year as they were working on it, they were in correspondence via email and telephone with Bob Lazar. Now, why would they call him?
Gee. Wow. So let's see. You found one of the biggest questions about Bob Lazar is his education.
Right.
How did he land in that position with an education that can't be confirmed?
Yeah. How did he land at Los Alamos with an education that can't be confirmed? He must have had schooling to get a job working at the Maison facility, the particle accelerator at Los Alamos, which, by the way, despite the rolling over in everybody's grave, Stan Freeman, you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you keep lying to the public. He keeps trying to minimize Bob's character. He keeps trying to say, oh, he was a janitor, maybe a subcontractor. Everybody at Los Alamos, most people are subcontractors.
Yes.
So
right.
guess what?
Yeah.
I found one. I found one of the scientists that was working out there. I verified his credentials. I physically have the papers showing he was there at that time. He also worked at China Lake, Lawrence Livermore, Los Alamos, all his contracts. And because he doesn't depend solely on it now, he came forward to me. I mean, I kind of had to hunt him down, but I found him.
You talking about Robert Krangle?
Yeah, Robert Krangle. Yeah, and you know the story. I found him, and he straight up 100%. I remember Bob Lazar. He was the physicist with the jet car, and yes, he was in security briefings with me. He laughed when I said, so he's not the concession stand salesman or the janitor. He laughed. No, he's a physicist. And then there goes Stan Freeman calling him up, harassing him days later, trying to twist his words. And he called me back. Who's this guy trying to twist my words? And I'm like, oh, that's what he does. That's Stan. So basically with the Lazar case, right, we are sure Bob worked at Los Alamos. That is verified. I mean, I've got things I can't even put public, but because of HEPA laws, the guy that digitized his medical files called me up. So I've got all these points of data. I hope to put them into the film. So now we know Bob did work in scientific capacity as a physicist at Los Alamos. That is totally unarguable. In fact, I have footage of him in Los Alamos. So sorry, everybody. That's going in the film. All your dreams will be shattered if you think he didn't work there. But how did he get to Los Alamos with an unconfirmed education? I can't answer that. I don't know. That's always been a problem for me and for George. But what George said, and I agree with him, the point was always Los Alamos. If we can prove he went to Los Alamos, then it doesn't matter if he was homeschooled. That would alley-oop him and set him up for potentially being picked up to work at the subbase of Area 51 on the Nellis Range. So if we can't prove his education, which we can't, I mean, I'm still working on that, okay? I'm still working on it. But even if I can't prove that, does that discount the in-your-face other elements of this case? Does that discount he knew where the saucer was coming up, that he knew about a secret base that was admitted to George Knapp but is now covered up again? It doesn't negate the other things that we could prove. And that's what's important. So we'll see. I don't know if his education will ever be proved. And I just don't know about his education. But again, I don't care if he was homeschooled. If I can prove he was working at Los Alamos on the at the Maison facility, the particle accelerator, and then was picked up to work in a government program. And again, remember, when he went to court, the judge was trying to get his employment records, and the judge was told, even when a senator asked for Bob Lazar's employment records, they didn't say, we don't have them. They said, you do not have a need to know.
Yeah. Wow.
That was in federal court.
Yeah. I was out there. I lived with my sister and brother-in-law, who he worked at the lab. And, you know, there's so many people that work there. And
Yeah.
you're right, a lot of them were contractors. So that's really amazing you were able to find someone that remembered him. Were there anyone, this was another question that someone sent in, were there any additional people at Los Alamos that you found? Or
Tons.
really?
Tons. Yeah. But here's the deal. Who's going to go on record with me? Who's going to go on camera? I mean, look, and I'm not the only one. George has talked to a lot of his colleagues. And actually, one of his friends, Joe Vaninetti, came out and wrote in public forums about how Bob, you know, worked there. And I guess the definitive thing is I have footage of Bob walking all around the Maison facility. So why don't I just put that in the film and shut everybody up? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't allowed that to be public as of yet. So it's like almost like, you know, his defensiveness to it, which I understand it, and his need for privacy, he hasn't made it easy to believe him. But that's kind of because he doesn't care, or he didn't care. I don't know that he cares. But at the time, he didn't. He was just doing it to save his own hide. He was under attack. He was under threat. Anybody that was part of his life at that time, which I've interviewed many now on camera, one of his best friends, they all saw it. One of the guys that was tasked with harassing George Knapp and tapping their phones and following Bob, George ran into one of the guys much later in life, and the guy kind of apologized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, when will this film, do you have an idea when it will be released?
Yeah, man. I am jamming on this. I got 12 months. I'm doing this. This is a 2018 film, this documentary, the definitive documentary on Bob Lazar. So unless there's something I don't see, it will be done in 2018. You can bank on that.
Wow. And that's great. Now, there was one other question about the Skinwalker Ranch. Is there something you're doing on that as well? I know I saw something on your website about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know, George Knapp and Colm Kelleher, lead scientist for NIDS, when Bigelow was running that organization to study Skinwalker Ranch and the whole territory there within the Uinta Basin, including Fort Duchesne, when they had 7 scientists for 7 years, the most documented scientifically paranormal hotspot in history. They wrote a book, huntfortheskinwalker.com. I made a website called hunttheskinwalker.com, and that's separate than my primary website, which is extraordinarybeliefs.com. But I did that specifically for this project, and this project is the first time in history that the Ute Nation, the tribal elders, allowed us to actually camp on the land in the path of the Skinwalker, and we were able to take footage and take it off of the Ute Nation, which is a sovereign nation. And yeah, that's in process. And basically, I'm just following the footsteps of my mentor, George. And because of his book and because of his demeanor and how he's taken the case seriously for, 25 years, and he's kept his silence on a lot of things when it was under Bigelow control, which is not anymore. The ranch was sold.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, yeah, we're doing that. We're documenting. We're actively meeting with witnesses on a regular basis and going out there, and we have had access to the ranch itself, and that's wonderful. But understand.
Whoop.
Phenomenon.
Oh. Well, hey, that's it for the end of the show. So I encourage the listener to check out Patient 17. It's on iTunes, Amazon, and a few other places. And your website is Extraordinary Beliefs. And is it .com?
Yep, extraordinarybeliefs.com.
What a great domain site that is.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on. You have a great show, and I can't believe this is a 6-year anniversary. Keep it up, man. You're going to learn a lot.
All right. All right, you take care.
You too. Talk soon.
Yeah, all right, bye-bye. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for hanging in there tonight. And next week we have James McDonald. He is going to be talking about the Betty and Barney Hill case. It should be interesting. Unfortunately, he's not buying it. So it'll be an interesting show to hear his side and what he has to say about it. I do like to have skeptics on now and then, so we can just hear their side of things and their argument. All right, so I'll be back next week at the same time. Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.